Good Story, a blog post written and narrated by Robert Fairhead from the Tall and True Writers website. My first published writing was an Enid Blyton-Famous Five-style adventure story, Sand Island, in 1972. I wrote the story and illustrated it with coloured Texta markers. My aunt, the only one in her family with a typewriter, typed up the manuscript, and my father helped me bind and cover the book. I was 10. My treasured first and only edition still exists. I recently reread the book, and it reminded me of the 5 elements of a good story: characters, plot, setting, tension, and resolution. A good story needs characters. I loved Enid Blyton's Secret 7 and Famous 5 stories when I was young, and the opening lines to Sand Island are Blyton-esque. Said Jack. That tasted good. I know, grinned John. Why are you grinning, John? Asked Jane, curiously. My mother made the cake. Our mother, said little Wendy. Okay, Blyton-esque and a little embarrassing, but I was only 10, and now, having established the characters and some of the relationships in the story, it was time for me to set up the adventure. Well, now what do we do? Asked Jack. John's birthday party is over, and there's nothing to do. Remember, this was a time before computer games and gadgets, when TVs were black and white and offered limited program options for children. I know, said Jane thoughtfully. Why don't we go to that little island of sand in the river? What for, dumbbell? Said Jack in a dreary voice. For a picnic, said Jane. That's a good idea, you know, said John. You're right, agreed Jack. Yes, Sand Island has more than a hint of the sibling rivalry and hero worship found in Blyton's Famous Five. Jane might sound like Anne, Jack could be Dick, and John may remind Blyton readers of the Five's leader, Julian. But it wasn't total plagiarism. There was no Cousin George character, or Timmy the dog. Woof! And, don't forget me, butted in Wendy. You're too young, answered John. No, I'm not, said Wendy. Okay, you can come, sighed John. And I suggest we make our plans tomorrow. A good story needs a plot. The children meet at Jack and Jane's house the next day to plan their adventure. Jack points to a map of the island and suggests we take this part of the sand, as it has some greenness. Fortuitously, Jack's dad owns a rowing boat. It seems irresponsible today, but the children's parents permit Jack, Jane, John and Wendy to row to the island for a picnic and games. On the way, Wendy proposes the four-singer song. I know one, suggested Jack. It's called Row, Row, Row Your Boat. Do you all know it? Yes, they all agreed. 1, 2, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Thankfully for the reader, it only takes a few renditions for the children to reach Sand Island. A good story needs a setting. John and Jack drag the boat onto the white sand of the beach that I'd coloured yellow in my illustrations. The children spot the place they had picked for their picnic and race each other to it. Last one there's a rotten egg, shouted Jack. Since John was the eldest, being 11, he won, followed by Jack, Jane, and last of all, Wendy. The 4 children enjoy their picnic and exploring the island. However, soon the day became a little bit dark. John organises a last race around the island. He ties for first place with Jack, but both boys easily beat the younger girls and start packing the boat while waiting for Jane and Wendy. A good story needs conflict. When Jane finally joins the boys, she asks, Where's Wendy? Big brother John retorts, I thought Wendy was with you. Where was she? They had better find her soon, for when the tide rises, Sand Island will be covered with water. The children split up to search 3 points of the island. When they regroup, John remarks they still need to check the east end of Sand Island. But we didn't run there, replied Jack. You know, and I know we didn't run there, but does Wendy? As John, Jack and Jane approach the east end of the island, they hear screams. Ah! Ah! They were coming from the direction of a big amount of quicksand. The children ran to where the noise was, and can you guess what they found? It was Wendy. While Jane bursts into tears, John and Jack grab a vine and throw it across to Wendy, and the boys pull her from the quicksand. Everyone is relieved, and Jane and Wendy stop crying. Sorry, the famous Five George would have been braver. But on their way back to the boat on the beach, suddenly they heard a rumble, and then water. John said the tide was coming in, and that in less than 2 minutes the island would be underwater. I suggest we climb a palm tree, said Jack. Good idea, Jack, John agreed. The water won't go over the top of the palm trees. So the children ran to the nearest palm tree. Led by John, the children climb the tree as the incoming tide rushes towards them. Soon all they can see of the flooded sand island is the tops of the palm trees. Each child had some fear in their heart, for they knew if the water rose any more, they would drown. A good story needs a resolution. Somehow, John, Jack, Jane and Wendy sleep through the night. In the morning, John wakes first to find the island glittered brightly in the sunlight. The 4 children climb down from the palm tree and return to the beach. However, the boat is missing. The children scanned the beach for the boat, but could not find it, so they gave up, knowing they were doomed. At this point, the story begins to sound more like a scene from Lord of the Flies, though I didn't read William Golding's classic until my mid-20s. Oh, it's all your fault, Jane, said Jack nastily. You and your stupid idea to come to Sand Island. No, I should take the blame, Jack, not Jane, said John. If I hadn't organised that last run around the island, we would be home by now. I agree, John, said the very agreeable Wendy. You would, wouldn't you, Wendy? Cried Jane. I know your boyfriend, Jane, said Wendy. Oh, shut up, all of you, shouted John, trying hard to keep away the tears too. But then the children hear voices calling out their names. It's Daddy, Jane screams excitedly. The children's negligent parents have come to the rescue, and John, Jack, Jane and Wendy are soon safely in a speedboat heading away from Sand Island. Boy, what a story to tell the kids at school, said Jack eagerly. Yeah, it would be kind of exciting, wouldn't it? Agreed John. I wasn't frightened one bit, remarked Wendy boldly. Ha ha ha, laughed Jane, John and Jack. What's the big joke? Asked Wendy. What, you just said, about never being scared. Laughed Jack. Yeah, remember the time you fell in the quicksand? Agreed John. Hee hee, and the time you thought we were doomed? Hee hee, giggled Jane. By the time they stopped laughing and giggling, the children were home and ready to tell everyone about their adventure. The 50th anniversary of a good story. My earliest school memories are of learning to read and write, and then writing stories. 2022 marks the 50th anniversary of my first published writing, inspired by Enid Blyton and my 10-year-old imagination, which back then wasn't distracted by computers, gadgets, or all-day TV. Reading Sand Island with my middle-aged writer's eyes, I'm pleased to see that the young me understood the 5 elements of a good story: characters, plot, setting, tension, and resolution. I try to incorporate these elements in my writing today, even if the middle-aged me sometimes leaves the resolution hanging in my short stories. Hi, I'm Robert Fairhead from Tall and True Short Reads and the Tall and True Writers website. I wrote this blog post, shared as A Good Story, Sand Island, on Tall and True, in February 2021, 1 year before the 50th anniversary of publishing Sand Island as a 10-year-old in 1972. As I revealed in the post, the story was inspired by my love of Enid Blyton's adventure stories, my 10-year-old imagination, and my love of writing. It also helped that I didn't have the modern-day distractions of computers, gadgets, and 24-hour TV. I quoted paragraphs and dialogue from Sand Island in the blog post, which is why the writing and narration might sound a little bit immature. I also shared photos of my Texta-coloured illustrations in the post, including the 4 children in the boat rowing to Sand Island while singing "Row, row, row your boat." I've included links to the Tall and True blog post in the show notes, so you can read it and look at the illustrations. Between you and me, it's just as well I stuck to writing, and didn't pursue a career as an artist. I also mentioned Sand Island in episode 88 of Tall and True Short Reads, Finding Inspiration. You'll find a link to the episode in the show notes. I hope you enjoyed a good story. You can read all my blog posts, selected short stories and other writings on tallandtrue.com. You can also buy the Tall and True Microfiction Anthology and my short story collections from the Amazon Kindle, Apple Books and Kobo online bookstores. Links are available in the show notes. The next episode of Tall and True Short Reads will be released shortly. In the meantime, please check your feed or the podcast website, tallandtrueshortreads.com, for earlier episodes from all 4 seasons. And follow or subscribe to the podcast and rate and review it via your favourite app. Doing so helps share my storytelling. You can support the podcast financially by making a small one-off or regular donation via the Acast supporter page. There's a link in the show notes. Finally, please share this episode with family and friends and tell them about Tall and True Short Reads and the Tall and True Writers website.